All right, so today we're going to be going over whether something is a function or not. So if you look at this foldable, it's going to be divided into two different sections. What would not be considered a function and what would be considered a function. So at the top, we're going to go through basically just a brief definition on what a function even is and then what it takes to be a function. So right up here, we're just going to write function. And then basically just the short definition of a function. So in order to be a function, each member of the what's called the domain, which is in other words just the x's, so each of the x's must be paired with only one member of the range or in other words, the y. So basically only each member of the x can only be paired with only one member of the y. And in other words, which is a lot more simpler words that might be easier to remember, is the x's can't repeat themselves. So here's an example. So let's say they give you just like a series of coordinates and they ask you, is this a function? So if they give you something like 4 and 6, 8 and 2, and 3 and -1. Okay. These coordinates together are going to be considered a function because if you look at the x's, they are not repeating themselves. All right, so we're going to go through these different examples right here and state why they're functions and basically just put some examples of functions on here. So right here, this little setup is called a mapping. So this is kind of how it's going to look for the most part. It's going to have some numbers in the x's, going to have some numbers in the y's. And then there's going to be arrows that are pointing from the x's to the y's. And basically whichever arrows that are pointing from whichever numbers, those are going to be their pairs. All right, so like 1 is paired with 5, 2 is paired with 15, 3 is paired with 10, and 4 could just be paired with this 20. All right, so we're going to say this is a function because every x is paired with a different y. Or in other words, these x's are not repeating themselves. They're not trying to go to, like for example, this 1 is not trying to go to this 5 and this 10 at the same time. This x is just trying to go with that one y. This x is trying to go to that one y, okay? All right, so second one, or I guess third example, because this was considered an example as well. So that's the second example, this one's a third. So just a regular old table. So let's say this table says 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the x's. Then in the y's it says just like 10's going all the way down. All right. This is going to be considered a function because if you look right here, are your x's repeating? No, they are not. Your y's are, but it's okay for your y's to repeat. All right, they don't really matter, but your x's cannot repeat themselves. The y's can do kind of whatever they want. So we're going to say this is a function because the x's do not repeat. And we'll put in parentheses the y's can. All right, and then the last thing is if they give you a graph. So they can give you different types of things on these graphs. They can give you weird little shapes on these graphs. They can give you like a series of just kind of dots on this graph, whatever. Anything pretty much is up to fair game with these graphs. Let's say they give you something like this. This is going to be called a parabola. And you'll learn about it next year in algebra. Basically, it's just kind of a U-looking shape. All right. We have to figure out if this is a function or not. How we can figure this out is doing something called the vertical line test. All right, so if you remember, a vertical line is a line that goes straight up and down. And I'm just doing this in a different color. You don't have to. You can just use your pen. But I just want to kind of make it obvious what a vertical line test is. So with a vertical line test, if you put a vertical line just anywhere through your picture that they have there, your vertical line can only pass through the picture one time. So if I take this blue pen, I do the vertical line test. How many times did my blue line pass through this picture? Only one time, and it's right here. So that means that this picture on this graph winds up passing the vertical line test because it only passed through one time. If it passed through any more than once, then it's not going to pass and it's not a function. So right here, we're going to say this is a function because it passes the vertical line test, or in other words, the VLT. We'll start shortening that to that. And then in parentheses, we're going to just put, of course, a little bitty o. We'll say only goes through. We'll shorten that through to like drive through, as in through. Only goes through once. If that vertical line test were to go through any more than one time, then it would not be a function. And that's part one. I'll make sure I upload part two in a second.